I'm Eric Wolf, and my experience in business peer groups has changed my life, especially my membership in Vistage, one of the world's largest CEO advisory groups. I'm an entrepreneur, a business owner, and a Vistage speaker on the power of marketing. This podcast is dedicated to the people who make those experiences possible, the peer group chairs. Every episode, I interview a Vistage Chair who has dedicated their time to helping entrepreneurs like me succeed. Welcome to Chairwaves. My guest today is Mr. Ken Mandelbaum, who is a Vistage Chair in Northern New Jersey, the Garden State. And welcome, Ken. It's so great to have you.
Thank you, Eric. Good to be with you.
Awesome. So the first thing that I really like to talk to people, not just about their Vistage practice, but about their journey. But with you, I know that there's something really special that you pride yourself in, which is essentially transformation. Can you tell me what transformation means to you and the business owners that you work with, and how you go about doing that?
Sure. Very good. So look, transformation is a term that everybody throws around. You know, you change your shirt, people think it's a transformative event.
Mm-hmm.
But in the world of transformation as we use it, it is what happens when someone discovers something that they didn't see a moment earlier. So you and I have, over time, have discovered something about ourselves. We talk about it like an aha moment, when something became available to us about ourselves, about how we see things, about how we live our lives, about how we see other people, about the world in which we operate. And in the moment that you see something newly, a new world becomes available to you, including a new set of actions that weren't available to you a moment earlier. Now, all of us love it when we have those things happen. But mostly people don't know how to create that. And oftentimes what gets created is inside of a conversation with someone who can ask the right questions, explore ideas with us. And so as a Vistage Chair, particularly given my background in transformational methodologies, what I look for is opportunities to help people discover that which is unavailable to them. That might be in noticing a constraint or a belief that doesn't give them access to the kind of freedom or possibilities that they say they're committed to. It may be a story from the past that gives them a particular view of themselves or of life. And so if you hear those things and you can delve into them and open the door for people to begin to look, invariably they can begin to examine it and see something else beyond what was already there.
Tell me how did you? Well, I'd love to hear actually about how did your career begin? What was the beginning of the journey like that ultimately led you to transformation?
Okay, great. I'll give you a quick background.
Sure.
So my father and his two brothers and my grandmother started a business called Mandy and Annie Says. Originally, it was just Mandy back in the late 1940s. My grandmother was an entrepreneur. She lost her husband when my father was 5. During the Depression, my grandmother ran a little candy store and sold, a number of different things in the store. When the boys came back from the service, they opened up this little cotton goods store in Brooklyn, New York. Things that, aprons, house dresses, blouses, $1 to $3 back in the day. And after the first Mother's Day, they did $1,000 and they got the other boys together, none of which had any experience selling and buying women's clothing. And they decided to go into business together and open up our first store. Well, growing up, this was my life. I would go with my dad and spend time on the weekends helping him in the store as early as 6 years old. So I had a keen interest in business. And at 16, I started my first company. At 17, I started my second company.
What was the first company?
First company was, you remember years ago when kids wore patches on their jeans?
Yes.
Well, before the stores had them, I met with a company who manufactured these. I got a line with about 500 patches, got about 5 kids in school who wanted to be reps, and we sold them to the kids in school. My mom was the bookkeeper.
There you go.
We started our first business. The second business was selling bootleg records.
Okay.
That back in the day, probably my third job I think it was around 16 or 17, was at a high-end men's clothing store. And I loved working here. And we were a ticket center for the Fillmore East in New York. So we used to get tickets to go to the Fillmore, and people would make copies of the concerts, all unbelievable performers. And we used to get copies of these records, and we would sell them. So that was my second career.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so then I went off to school, and I started in business and fell in love with psychology, and I graduated with a degree in clinical psychology. And the decision was, do I continue to get my PhD, or do I go into my family's business, for which my folks really wanted me to choose that? And I figured frankly, I was tired of being broke. And my parents hadn't gone to college. They didn't know what it took to live in school. They gave me $90 a month. Somehow I squeaked it out. I was manufacturing leather goods when I was in college to pay for my existence. And so I decided I was going to give the business a try and see what it was like for a year. And I loved it. And so I continued to work in the business and grow it. I went from a assistant manager over a number of years to become the CEO, and learned every aspect of the business. Well, over those years, there were a number of things that I did that were really meaningful. Most important were things like I studied total quality management, from one of the top 3 gurus who invented TQM, and then trained the Japanese in becoming competitors to the United States automobile industry, almost destroyed our industry. These were the guys that came out with the Toyota and Nissan, and really impacted the automobile industry. And I spent 2 years working with them, brought total quality management back into my company. I got very interested in in leadership, and studied the Malcolm Baldrige Award, and then spent years working with companies that won the award, people like Ritz-Carlton, Federal Express, and went there and studied what they had learned, how they had implemented the techniques and the ideas that allowed them to be a winner. And from there, I went to a program called the Landmark Forum. Landmark Education was an organization that trained people in personal transformation. What does it mean to be the person that you are? How did you develop that way? How was your thinking impacted? What were the stories and experiences that you had in your life that allowed you to become the person you are? And I loved the work. I just loved it.
And around what year was this that you discovered this?
This was about 1985.
Okay.
85, 90.
Okay.
My son, interestingly enough, who was 18 at the time, introduced me to it, wanted to go with me to do the Landmark Forum. having been to a evening session with a friend who was just completing the forum. And so he asked me if I would do it with him. I didn't know what I was going to be walking into, but I
Right.
said, of course. So we both loved it. We took a few courses. And ironically, one of the most senior leaders at Landmark took a liking to me and asked me if I would be willing and interested in learning how to lead programs. And I was very interested. So I spent many years training and being mentored to become one of the top seminar leaders in the world, leading transformational conversations with groups of 200 people at a time each week. And from there, a number of people who were also seminar leaders, we decided that we wanted to expand how we used the technology around transformation and bring it into business. And so today, we've developed and used transformational methodologies with our clients, and it's being used by other highly trained seminar leaders in business around the world today. And so that gives you a little bit of my background from going into, we sold our retail business. We had 3 different divisions, 165 stores. We had a finance company and a real estate investment business. We've kept the real estate investment business, opened up a family office, but the other businesses we sold. And during that time, while I was running my company, I was a Vistage member for 11 years. And after I sold my business, I was asked to become a Vistage Chair, which I decided to do. And about 13 years ago, I started my own practice.
Very cool. So number one, and I've talked to a number of chairs that were members before. Many are not.
Yeah.
It's a lot more common that chairs first heard of Vistage when they were being recruited by Vistage to become chairs.
Yeah.
So what was your experience as a member, and what made you feel like, yes, this is what I want to do with the next stage in my career. I want to, I'm going to be a chair.
Good question. So when I sold my business, don't forget I had now a good 15, 20 years of focus around leadership, performance. I studied up at Harvard on strategy. I've worked with all these different companies, learning how they operated to win the Malcolm Baldrige Award. I was really inspired and trained and developed at Vistage, listening to speakers in my group to continue to develop my speaking, my ability to influence, and really work in the space of leadership. And then, simultaneously, I had now become a transformational coach, working with Landmark, designing transformational methodologies in business. And so I had thought 10, 15 years before I sold my business about what would be next for me. And that really was my love. So after selling the business, I did 2 things. I started working with other transformational leaders and developed we went into business together, working with clients to bring that thinking to their businesses. I also decided I wanted to try out being a Vistage Chair because I really loved the experience of being a member. By the way, that was one of the most difficult things I had ever done. Being a seminar leader was by far the hardest. Being a Vistage Chair was second, but really took something.
That's a common theme on this podcast, by the way. Yeah. We hear that a lot.
Yeah. So, it was simply my willingness and demand to be successful that got me through it.
Well, the stick-to-itiveness, it works. You are the chair now of a number of groups. So you've got two CE groups, you've got a key group, um, and you are also the best practice chair for New Jersey. And of course, the best practice chair is kind of like the chair of the chairs.
Yeah. So not just New Jersey, Connecticut, and New York State.
And New York State.
And I'm
How
also
many
the
how
best
many
practice.
chairs are you working with in that
It's about
region?
18 in that area. And then I'm also the best practice chair for the country of Israel.
Which is also a really interesting thing that I wanted to chat with you about. So how is it working with the chairs in Israel? And certainly life in Israel is very, very different than life in the States right now. What what are you having to, I guess, what are the differences for you in terms of how you approach your group of chairs here in America versus in Israel?
I'll give you the significant difference. The chairs in Israel have never been in a Vistage meeting. None of them were, there's no foundation for chairing. Even the owner of Israel has never been a chair.
Mm.
So when they asked me to become the best practice chair at the time, I think there were 3 or 4 chairs. And, they went through a training that's offered at Vistage, but like any other training, you could go to law school and not really know what it takes to practice
Oh,
law.
sure.
So the training is about 2 weeks that Vistage offers. It's useful, it's valuable,
Yeah.
but it doesn't. You walk out with 100 questions every day. How do you deal with this? And what do you say here? And what happens when this happens? And how do you build your group? I mean, there's a million things that people are faced with as a chair. And so I work with them so that they develop the skills and learn and answer their questions.
What's it fun what's been the, I guess what I want to ask is, how do you go about um, helping people create great Vistage experiences in a country where none of the people that you're working with know what that is or have experienced it firsthand? It's sort of like telling somebody to that's never seen a horse to paint a horse.
Yeah, almost.
Almost.
Yeah. So, Eric, look, everybody who's a chair is highly committed, highly trained as a leader.
Highly
With
intelligent, very experienced.
These are unbelievable people. They're bright. They're they're highly accomplished as business people, and now they're moving into a different world of being a coach, working with other CEOs.
Mm-hmm.
So, the one really beautiful thing about chairing and building a group is that you get to be with people who don't have an experience of being in a space where they have the privilege and freedom to say things in a confidential, trusting environment, to have their self-expression, to voice their concerns, to be vulnerable with each other. Now, a chair that knows how to create that space is gold. Chairs can, open up the dialogue, open up the space for people to look, to challenge each other in a way that's
Mm-hmm.
respectful, but to really give people the privilege of being able to say, I don't know how to do this. I'm scared about this. I'm worried about how much time I'm spending at work and the impact that's having on my family. I've got people in my company who are struggling with their own what there is to do and how to do it in the best way. I worry about how I look. Am I getting feedback? Leaders have a world of concerns, And not to mention the fact that they're trying to make some money at the game, trying to build a business, building a
We all like
culture.
earning a living, like being able to pay for food and things like that.
That's right. So, years ago, running a business was much simpler. You could decide to sell a product, and you'd get people who wanted to work for you. You told them what to do, and they did it. Well, it's not quite that simple anymore.
Well, and
You got to,
not only is it not only is it less simple, significantly less simple, it's also significantly faster now than it was back in the day. We move at a pace today that would have been unheard of 20 years ago.
that's right. When we went into business, there was very little competition. Today, anybody can sell something on the internet,
It's
and
true.
everybody does. That's an exaggeration, but there's tremendous competition, and people are inventing things like that. And they've got all sorts of tools. So this, like you said, the space is fast changing, um, and there's tremendous competition. But people are left with lots of questions, and people who are willing to live in the world of questions will learn.
Hmm. What do you when you are sitting across the table from somebody who is about to become a Vistage member or thinking about becoming a Vistage member, what what are the things that you're telling them about how they're going to make their Vistage experience the most successful?
Well, a few things. The first is to get really interested in the members of the group. This is an incredible opportunity to meet extraordinary people who share very similar kinds of concerns and interests. And so bringing your own curiosity, your own, the opportunity at Vistage is to have lifelong friends at a very
Hmm.
deep level. The second thing is, this isn't about, if you walk into Vistage Group and you think the way to show up is that you got it handled, that's the booby prize. The way to look good in Vistage is to be vulnerable and to talk
That's right.
about what you're struggling with, what you need other people's help with, what you want to share with people. People like that are loved in Vistage and well regarded and really
Yes.
respected. So, and then, I look with people about what are they committed to? What are they struggling with? What are they committed to? What are the areas that they want to focus on? And where are the constraints that keep them from having the very thing that they say are most important to them? Ironically, what people say they want and what they're willing to do about it is a big gap.
Usually that's correct. Usually that's very correct.
Yeah.
So, what is, and now being a chair, you said 13 years. What is the biggest thing that you've learned in that time about being a really, really great chair? And what is the advice that, based on that, that you then give to a new chair that ends up in your best practice group?
So, Eric, there's something that you may be aware of. Not everybody can see it in the way I'm going to say it to you, but there's something about space. So you are a space. You create a space in your speaking and being. The space is either one that's free for people to discover and to be, a space of curiosity, a space of acceptance, a space of trust. Or there's the space that people ordinarily operate in, which is judgment, criticism, self-doubt, like that,
Mm-hmm.
making themselves and others wrong. So what I work on all the time is the space that I am and the space that I want to create for other people.
Okay. I like that. I had never thought of myself as a space before. My mother used to say that I was like a void, but not the same thing.
Not the same
So
thing. So
yeah, very good.
I walk into this meeting with you, and who you are immediately is warm, inviting. You created a space in which I could show up
Hmm.
without prejudgment, without any interference or resistance. That was the space that you created on this call.
Well, and I appreciate that. I work actually work pretty hard to make this a really good experience for you guys. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Um, what's uh, what's the biggest lesson that being a chair has taught you? What's the thing that is now better about you as a person because of your experience chairing for the last 13 years?
Doing the work.
Mm-hmm.
Everything I train anybody on, anything I talk about, for I always do it in my own life first. If I'm working on my integrity and I'm having a conversation about integrity with people, about workability, about the impact of honoring their word, if I'm talking to them about any distinction. See, people talk in terms of of generalities and concepts. They talk about things like leadership. They talk about things like integrity. I go to work at being able to be the source of those concepts so I own them like a distinction, being able to see it fully in my life, how it shows up, what does it mean, what is it not.
That's a great answer. That's actually a wonderful answer, and I like that quite a bit. Ken, it's been lovely having you on the podcast today. If folks have questions about your groups, about sharing in Israel, what's the best way for folks to get in touch with you?
They could email me.
Very good. We'll go ahead. We'll make sure your email is in the show notes so that people can find that. Ken, thanks for being a great guest.
You're welcome. Pleasure to be with you, Eric. Thank
You
you.
got it.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Chairwaves. You can subscribe to our feed using Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your platform of choice. You can also visit chairwaves.com for more information. Chairwaves is hosted and produced by me, Erik Wolf, and to connect with me, you can visit my website at ewolf.live. That's EWOLF.live. And a disclaimer, while I love Vistage and CEO peer groups, this podcast is not owned by or affiliated with Vistage or any other peer organization. Thanks for listening.